This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one country, one leader, or one decision. This is about something heavy moving very slowly beneath the surface. So slowly, most people don't notice it at all. If you're waiting for explosions or sirens to tell you when a global system is failing, you'll miss it. Because real collapse doesn't announce itself. It migrates, quietly, legally, line by line. Tonight, I want to show you a signal that almost no one talks about out loud. Not because it's secret, but because once you see it, you can't unsee what it implies. It doesn't live on a battlefield. It doesn't move with troops. It sits inside spreadsheets and footnotes and numbers that are supposed to mean stability. Stay with me. Because what's happening here isn't noise. It's preparation. And once you understand what is being prepared for, the rest of the system starts to look very different. For years, we were told this system was governed by markets, by rational actors, by price signals, and efficiency. That story is now obsolete. What actually holds the system together today is not confidence, it's obligation and pressure. The most important financial market on Earth is no longer controlled by investors asking, is this worth it? It's controlled by institutions asking a different question. What happens if we don't? This is not a market-clearing price. It's a negotiated one. When stability depends on who cannot afford to say no, the system stops being economic. It becomes political, and politics does not scale cleanly. What looks like demand is often compliance. What looks like liquidity is often substitution. And what looks like resilience can actually be strain redistributed outward, away from the center, toward whoever is closest and least able to refuse. That distinction matters. Because systems held together by choice bend, systems held together by pressure snap. And the pressure right now is moving. The most dangerous changes don't arrive as shocks. They arrive as adjustments, slow enough to feel reasonable, small enough to explain away. There was a time when this system worked because it was reciprocal. Goods moved one direction, capital moved the other. Everyone involved could point to a benefit and call it stability. That balance didn't collapse overnight. It thinned. Ownership shifted quietly, not announced, not debated. Numbers that used to sit still began drifting. Down, then lower. Month after month, year after year. At first, it looked like diversification, then like prudence, then like coincidence. But here's the rule history keeps teaching us. When a long-term position is reduced steadily through good markets and bad ones, through profit and loss alike, it's no longer about returns. It's about exposure. And when exposure becomes the risk, the decision has already been made. You're just watching it play out in slow motion. That's when normalization becomes camouflage. And the quiet part starts doing the most damage. This is where the numbers stop being abstract. Buried inside one of the dullest government reports imaginable is a figure that should have stopped the room. It didn't. It slipped past almost unnoticed. A position that once anchored the system has been cut nearly in half. Not trimmed, not adjusted. Liquidated. And here's the part that matters. The selling didn't happen during a boom. It didn't happen when prices were high and exits were easy. It happened when prices were down. When volatility was elevated, when anyone selling was locking in losses, that's not how rational portfolio management works. You don't crystallize losses on an asset this large unless something else is more dangerous than the loss itself. Especially not when you have cash. Especially not when time is on your side. This wasn't optimization. It was urgency. The kind of urgency that shows up when an asset stops being neutral, when it stops being a buffer and starts behaving like a trap. That's the shock. Because once a cornerstone asset is treated that way, the risk isn't in the price. It's in what comes next. To understand what's really happening, you have to stop thinking about this as selling and start thinking about it as reclassification. In this system, not all assets are equal. Some earn yield, some preserve value, and some exist for a different reason entirely. They signal alignment. For years, holding this asset meant participation. It meant access. It meant being inside the perimeter. But the moment access can be revoked, alignment becomes exposure, and exposure becomes liability. That's when the math changes. The question stops being, what is the return? And becomes, who controls the switch? Once that question enters the calculation, price no longer matters. Jurisdiction does. So the system adapts, not by collapsing, but by rerouting stress. As one major holder steps back, others are pulled forward, not because the trade is attractive, but because the alternative is worse. This is how stability is maintained now. Not through balance, through substitution. And substitution works right up until the next absorber fills up. Here's where the pace changes. Because once substitution begins, time compresses. One exit becomes many transactions. Many transactions become flow, and flow starts demanding capacity. The system can absorb a seller. It cannot absorb a strategy. Every unit that leaves has to land somewhere, immediately, continuously. That creates strain you don't see on price charts. You see it in who shows up to buy and who suddenly has no choice. This is where normal buyers disappear and stand-ins arrive. Entities that weren't meant to hold this much weight. Balance sheets stretched thin. Margins already spoken for. They step in anyway, not because it's profitable, because if they don't, something breaks. This is how stress propagates. Not as panic, as obligation, and obligation accelerates faster than fear. Because fear hesitates. Obligation doesn't. Once that line is crossed, the system isn't correcting itself anymore. It's outrunning itself. And that's when the clock starts moving faster than anyone expected. At this point, it stops being abstract, because this system doesn't fail in conference rooms. It fails where you live. When strain is rerouted upward, it eventually comes back down. Through prices, through credit, through the quiet tightening you feel before anyone names it. You don't see the mechanism. You experience the output. Loans get harder to refinance. Mortgages stop making sense. Savings earn less than what life costs. And you're told this is temporary, that it's cyclical, that patience will be rewarded. But what's happening underneath has nothing to do with patience. It has to do with priority. When a system is forced to choose between maintaining itself and serving the people inside it, it will always choose itself first. Stay with me here, because this is usually where people turn away. Not because it's complicated, but because it's uncomfortable. What's being protected right now is not your purchasing power. It's continuity. And continuity comes at a price. One, you're already paying, just not all at once. That's why the next shift matters more than the last one. What started as a domestic adjustment doesn't stay domestic for long, because this system is not local. It's layered, interlocked. When stress is pushed outward, it doesn't vanish. It migrates. Currencies begin to carry messages their governments didn't intend to send. Trade flows stop responding to efficiency and start responding to security. Capital moves not toward growth, but toward insulation. And suddenly, decisions made to stabilize one market distort 5 others. This is where allies stop acting like partners and start acting like buffers. Absorbing pressure, delaying consequences. But buffers degrade. They fatigue. A system that relies on everyone stepping in at the same time only works if no one steps out first. And history tells us that coordination breaks down precisely when it's needed most. At this stage, there is no neutral position. Every move signals something. Every pause does too. What looked like cooperation now looks like exposure. And no one is quite sure who's next. That uncertainty is the ripple. And it doesn't move in straight lines. From here, the system doesn't resolve. It accelerates. There are 3 ways this can go. The first is adjustment. Quiet, managed, the system tightens. Buyers demand more compensation. Costs rise slowly enough to explain, fast enough to matter. Nothing breaks outright. But nothing feels stable again either. The second path is erosion. Less orderly, confidence thins before prices do. Support holds until it doesn't, then reappears somewhere else. Institutions adapt by lowering expectations. What was once temporary becomes permanent. People adjust their lives downward, one decision at a time. And then there's rupture. This is the path no one schedules for. It begins when one absorber fails. When someone who was supposed to step in can't or won't. Liquidity vanishes in places it was assumed to exist. Intervention arrive late. And suddenly, the question isn't how to stabilize the system, but which parts are worth saving. None of these paths announce themselves clearly. They overlap, they blur. And the danger is not choosing the wrong one. It's assuming we're not already on one of them. There's a temptation at the end of stories like this to look for reassurance, for a stabilizer, for someone somewhere who still has control. That's not how this ends. What's unfolding isn't a crash. It's a repositioning, one that rewards those who move early and punishes those who assume permanence. The system you were told was neutral is being treated like terrain, mapped, contested, prepared. And the most dangerous part is this. From the outside, it still looks normal. Markets open. Transactions clear. Numbers update. But underneath, the logic has changed. Assets once held for return are being abandoned for survivability. Paper promises are being exchanged for things that don't need permission. That shift doesn't reverse quietly. It doesn't reverse at all. If you want to understand what comes next, you have to stop watching the surface and start tracking what powerful actors are willing to lose today to avoid losing everything tomorrow. This is not the end of the story. It's the hinge. Stay with me, because the next chapter won't be explained in advance.